Welcome back. I hope you guys all had a great weekend. Today we're going to do lesson 3, which covers a really important concept that you're going to use a lot actually in 8th grade, and it's called being proportional. And you've done a little bit of this earlier in the year, but it's been a while. So a table is proportional if you can multiply the x values by the same number every single time in order to get the y values. And that same number is usually referred to as a constant. And they're going to talk about that a lot in 8th grade. So, on the first one, I gave you a basic definition of a table that is proportional and one that's not proportional. So, when you're looking at something's proportional and you start with a 0, that's not the best place to start. You want to look one row down. So, when we look one row down, we look at 2 and 20. So, we're looking at 2 times what gives us 20. And we know that 2 times 10 gives us 20. So the question is 10 going to be constant the whole way through? So 3 times 10, does that give us 30? It does, so we know that that works. And then 4 times 10, that gives us 40, so that one worked. So now we can backtrack and look at the 0, and look at maybe 0 times 10. And 0 times anything is 0, so that means everything worked on all of those, which makes that table proportional. And your constant, for those of you that want a little stretch, would be 10. So let's take a look at the table that's not proportional. So looking at the top one, we're looking at 1 times what gives us 2, and that would be 2. Then on the next, so 2 is going to be the one that we're looking to see, does that repeat? Here we've got 2 times 2, does that give us 4? Yes, it does. And then we look at the next row where it says 3 times 2, that doesn't give us 5, that gives us 6. So that means that this one does not work. As soon as you have the first step that doesn't work, you're done and you know it's not proportional. If it's not proportional, it does not have a constant, so you would leave that blank. So, Allison, who is backpacking through the mountains, walks at a constant rate. Below is a rate table with how many miles she walked and the hours it took. And so they're telling you that this is the x and this is the y, which means we're moving in this direction. So again, 0 with 0, we're going to have to come back to that one. But 1 times 4 gives us 4. And I like to write that off to the side. I also like to underline the constant just to make sure I don't make any mistakes. Then we have 2 times 4. We want to know, does that equal 8? And it does. Keep in mind, if you don't feel like doing your times tables, you can always use a calculator to check it. So here we've got 3 times 4, and we want to know what 3 times 4 is. That does give us 12. And then we have 5 times 4, and that does give us 20. So when we look back up at the top and we check 0 times 4, 0 times 4 does equal 0. So because the number is the same on every single one of those, we know the answer to the question of is it proportional? The answer is yes. And how do we know? All x values times 4 equals all the y values. Students always ask for a hint on how do you figure out what that magic number is. And what you can do if, the times table thing isn't working for you, you can take the y and put y over x, as long as it's not with the zeros, and you can check it. So if you check the bottom one, 20 divided by 5 gives you 4, and so that becomes your constant that you're trying to multiply by. So if it gives you numbers that you're not super comfortable with, that's something that you can do in order to find that constant number. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at the second page. And so this one says, Peter is washing cars for extra money on the weekend. Below is a rate table with how much money he charged and the hours it took. So, again, we can't start with the zeros. We're going to start here. So 2 times what gives us 16? So we know that 2 times 8 gives us 16. So 3 times 8 gives us 24. So you're looking for how many groups. That's the way they talk about it in my daughter's class. So if we have 6 times how many groups gives us 48, that's going to be 8. We can check the 0. So 0 times 8, so if we have 0 groups of 8, that means we have nothing. We have absolutely nothing. So the only one we have to check is the 5. So 5 times 8, that doesn't give us 45, that gives us 40. So all it takes is one section not to work, and the answer becomes no. So no, the table is not proportional. How do we know? Because the x values are not multiplied by the same number. To get the y values. Okay. And so we're going to look at number 3. Number 3 is the same thing, only we're going to have you practice your graphing, just because graphing is also really important for 8th grade, and actually also for high school as well. I like to add an extra column on here, so you're going to see that a lot in the lessons. They don't always give that to you, but I think it's helpful to have something that says x and then y, so that we know what points to graph. So all we're doing is taking the x from the x column and then the y from the y column, and we're just writing it as an ordered pair. And remember that that is the location of the point. Okay, next thing we would do is we would mark this as an x and then this one as a y, just to make it easier to graph. So remember, when you're graphing, you're always starting from the origin, and the origin is going to be your 0 point. So we're going to go over 2 and up 4, and we're going to plot a point. We don't need to label the point here because we're going to be doing something different with it. So then we have over 3 and up 6, and over 4 and up 8, over 5 and up 10, and over 6 and up 12. And if I didn't have a touch screen, I would go ahead and use a ruler. I can't really do that here because the computer does not like it. So now the question says, is the table proportional? So we know that 2 times 2 does give us 4. So we know that one works. We know that 3 times 2 does give us 6. 4 times 2 does give us 8. 5 times 2 gives us 10. And then 6 times 2 gives us 12. So because we have 2's all the way down the middle, we know that the table is proportional. How do we know? X times 2 is always y. And we're going to continue with that same concept on Thursday. So if you have any questions, make sure you pop into office hours. I'd love to see you. Have a great day.